I'm Jade of Jaded Reader, and today I'm going to be introducing you to some different types of manga. So right now, some of you may know that I am in a Japanese literature class and a Japanese manga class. I chose these last two classes for my last term at college, and so far it's working out stupendously. I have learned quite a bit about different types of manga, and I really wanted to share it with you guys because I've been familiar with manga for a very long time, and I realized that sometimes I might give a recommendation, but it's not always the best recommendation for a beginner. So if you don't know anything about manga, settle in. I'll give you a little tour of the different types of manga, what you may and may not be looking for, as well as how to read manga in the first place. Sometimes when you're reading something backwards, it can be an overwhelming experience. The two first categories I want to tackle, and I am tackling them together, is shoujo and shonen manga. Shoujo is a demographic aimed towards more contemporary reads, more light reads. It has more romance. In Japan, it's known as like girl books, but I mean, come on, like it's 2019. We're gonna go ahead and go with people who like some of the things that are talked about in these manga. So what are talked about in shoujo manga? So in shoujo manga, we are often going to find the big question is, who am I? A lot of interiority and exploring the character or what's going on in the world. It's usually a teenager all the way up to about 18. So for people who are reading standard novels or books, this would be our YA section. A lot of the time it'll be contemporary, it'll have a focused romance. The main point is that the protagonist is trying to figure something out within themselves, and they're going on a more slow-paced exploration of their interiority. Shoujo manga usually have a lot of layering. They'll have word bubbles over top of faces. Sometimes you'll have a character go over several different panels. They usually are jumping out at you. They're trying to create a depth with you in the character. Shoujo manga also has the large eyes. They're trying to get you to really empathize with the main character. So you are supposed to find yourself within the main character and go on this inner journey with them. Shoujo manga are a lot of fun to read, though sometimes because they're exploring something that's more interior, the plot lines can come off as shallow. Some shoujo manga are meant to just be shallow. They're just fun, but there's usually something underneath it and you have to dig deep to figure it out. A caution or a criticism I have towards shoujo manga, it's not the one I am most drawn to. I actually don't have one to hold up because I don't think I have any shoujo manga with me. It usually is a bit too boy-centric for me. They can also be an incredible amount of fun. You can still have powerful female characters in shoujo manga, but that's kind of what I come across more or less. It's not the type of manga for me, but I have enjoyed shoujo manga in the past. Next up, I'm going to talk about shonen. So shonen manga is almost the antithesis of shoujo manga. You have a band of characters. It's usually not an individual, but a group of people, and they are on a mission to defeat whatever bad guy is happening. This is your fantasy. This is your quests. Originally, it was geared towards young male readers, but growing up, shonen manga was my absolute favorite type of manga to read. It was everything to me. It was Dragon Ball, it was Dragon Ball Z, Kitaro, just all of my favorite things. I don't know, I was kind of a spazzy kid, but ultimately it was my favorite. It's over the top, it's loud, and I always have fun reading it. It also deals with a lot of layering, and so shonen manga is a little bit more my thing, but it's completely a personal preference, and it definitely has its faults. It can be very juvenile. It relies on things such as fart jokes and just that common humor you find in younger adults no matter what. It can sometimes come off a little bit more middle grade than YA, though I think both stories are on par for like young adult audiences. I think that some of the humor and the dialogue especially can come off very much so middle grade. So as an example, I have Kitaro and the Great Tanuki Wars by Shigeru Mizuki. It follows a little boy who's part yokai, and he has a group of friends who are making trouble. He's trying to create peace within the yokai and human world because he is half human, half yokai, and you just have these very cartoonish characters doing very cartoonish things. So shonen manga are a lot of fun, but again, a little bit juvenile. Next up, we have josei manga and seinen manga. You'll notice the nen at the end is kind of a clue or indicator. So you have shonen and you have seinen. You have shoujo and you have josei. So those are kind of ways to indicate that we're kind of still talking about the same categories, the same demographics of people are going to read these manga as these people are going to kind of stay in this category. And then there's people who who read everything, but that's the demographic that they are aimed towards. So with josei manga, you are 18 and over. These are more adult manga. They often feature nudity and adult themes. However, if they do include nudity or sex, it usually is with purpose. There's a statement to be made or a reason why it's there in the first place, or it just won't be in there at all, but the themes and perspectives are definitely going to be adult. The protagonist will also be 18 or older. A good example I have of a josei manga is Tokyo Tarareba Girls by Hikiko Agashimura. So this follows our main character Rinko, and she just turned 33 and she would like to find a husband. We're getting some of those same shoujo vibes that we talked about before, but now she's an adult and there's other things to be talked about besides her husband. While she's trying to find this perfect partner, she's also dealing with sexism and ageism. So those are some of the major themes you would come across in a josei manga. So again, you are going to get a lot of layering. This is a really good example of layering where you have the panels kind of draw off, and this can look really overwhelming to a new reader because it's like, where do I even start? But we'll get to that at the end. You will still get pretty cutesy stereotypical vibes from a josei manga. It will also have a higher level of sophistication in it that I really like. Okay, now we have come to my favorite type of manga. We have reached it. It has happened. I grew up really liking shonen, so of course I ended up really liking seinen manga as I got older, and for that I have several different categories. These are manga that will be most typically featured on my channel because like they're incredibly fun to read for me. These are adult manga that to me have a quest or an experience. They have something to talk about, but a seinen manga essentially is going to be a more adult version of shonen. So you have a couple or grouping of people that are on a quest. Golden Kamui is a really good example of this. So you have our main protagonist Sugimoto, who is going on a quest with a Sherpa who is an Ainu native of Hokkaido, and they are going on a quest to find hidden treasure, but the only way they can do that is by collecting the skins of prisoners to create a map. Luckily, a Sherpa is on the trail and she decides that they do not actually have to skin these prisoners in order to draw the maps on the back of their backs. So thank goodness for a Sherpa, but the whole point being is these are usually really exciting. They feature an adventure, they feature really wacky like side characters, and you usually have lots of action. You'll have really quick paced panels where there's only 3 things on the page, but you know that you're supposed to be reading them quite quickly, and you'll have these full spread pages where you know that something dire is happening because it takes the full page to showcase it. Golden Kamui by Satoru Noda is a really great example of what you get out of seinen manga. There is going to be some layering, but it will be mostly focused on the pace in which you read panels, so sometimes it can be less words, more action, and at the end of the day, there's usually some sort of knowledge you're gaining out of it. In this, it has actually really cool ways that incorporate survival skills and surviving in the wilderness, along with actual Ainu culture. So you're still getting that higher adult reading experience, and it's also a lot of fun. Can you tell that that is my favorite? I went on about it for like ever. The next category I have to talk about is Gekiga. So Gekiga is going to be its own special category because Gekiga doesn't have a special demographic that it's going towards. It's just drama. Gekiga actually means dramatic picture. You're going to get a very detailed art style and a more interior message or an exterior adventure. So you have things like Lone Wolf and Cub, where you have a Ronin samurai who is going on adventures, and you have these super incredibly detailed pages and panels. They're a lot of the time more serious. The sexual content in Gekiga will almost always serve a purpose in the story. While the pictures are incredibly detailed, realistic, or cinematic, they can oftentimes, for me, be a little too severe. I have to focus on the page a lot longer because there's a lot more to look at, so they're a little bit more of a slower read, but I think that they're meant to be that way. You're not supposed to be diving necessarily into these people's minds, but instead experiencing their story from an outside perspective, a lot like you would watch a film. Because Gekiga can oftentimes be misunderstood for seinen or josei manga, I'm gonna say that the difference for me would be that these are going to be a little bit tighter of a plot and tighter with their panels. So you're not going to get a lot of layering effects, you're not going to get big wabams across the page. Gekiga manga just don't really have time for that. They usually have a higher lesson, such as a history lesson or teaching. You get a lot of non-fiction Gekiga, where they will make it historical fiction or entirely non-fiction altogether. Another great example of Gekiga is Ichi F by Kazuto Tasuta, and this is actually a memoir. It's a true story and you just get really clear-cut panels. If you're an adult trying to read a manga, Gekiga manga can be really good starters because you don't have a lot of layering or a lot of other things going on in the panels. You just have the dialogue and the pictures, and it's usually action to action so you can see exactly what's going on. And it takes a little bit longer to read so that you can take it in and you can practice. And again, Gekiga does usually feature nudity or sex, so if you are uncomfortable with any of those things, be a little wary. They'll have like cellophane wrapping around them, and that's to let you know that it has explicit pictures in it. This one features a shirtless woman that has like just a tattoo, and she kills people because they're so focused on her boobs that she's able to slice them in half. It was a great chapter. Then I'm going to get these last two out of the way because they are polar opposites but really easily defined. On one hand you have kodomomuke, or children's comics, and on the other hand you have hentai, which is porn. It's porn, guys. It's porn. These are very easily differentiated. Kodomomuke is going to be more like your Hello Kitty. I'll throw up some other characters that you may have seen, and those are going to be your kodomomuke, your children's cartoons, and they are a lot of fun. They're cute, they're simplistic, they're pretty much meant for simplistic enjoyment, and they do their job because they are adorable. Hentai, on the other hand, is also going to not have much of a plot or storyline or reason besides what it is, and that is sex and nudity. You'll find some pretty terrible plot lines, you will find some pretty detailed sex scenes, and not much else. They serve their purpose fairly well. They're very, very different though. I would be surprised if you mix these two up, but I mean, they are manga and they do come up. So that finishes up our 7 types of manga, and I will now get into how to read manga. So something you've probably heard is that you read manga backwards, which is true in the most like physical, literal way. So you have the front of a book, that book, I guess. And then you have the back of a manga. So it's definitely going to be an adjustment. It doesn't take you too long before you accidentally just start reading your comics the wrong way. That's the largest side effect. So you have panels and you're going to be reading from the top right, and you will work your way down to the bottom left of the panel. A panel is going to be the single rectangle, and it's going to be surrounded by a gutter. That's the space in between the panels. So you would go from the glass to Mike talking to Yaichi talking, and then once you got to this one, you would read this before going on to the next part of it. I suggest if you are a beginner to look for a manga that has very standard panels and doesn't want to overlayer its manga. It can be incredibly fun to read, but can also be a little overwhelming, and sometimes it's not really clear who's talking. I actually struggled with Sakura because I couldn't always tell who was speaking, and I'm fairly versed in manga, so there's definitely a range as far as how difficult it can be, so just look at the manga first, and it's usually pretty easy to tell right off the bat. A few last tips when you are trying to understand a manga or you are trying to get deeper meaning out of a manga. Water in manga is usually very important. It usually symbolizes reflection, so if you see someone in a hot tub or a pool or looking into a puddle or washing their face, this is definitely a time to pay attention to what some of the inner themes might be of this entire manga. If they go to hot springs, they're getting their thinking caps on. If you're trying to figure out which characters are not good characters, you're foreshadowing bad characters or characters you should not be relating to, it's going to be the characters with much more detailed characteristics than the main character. So it can be kind of a foreshadowing technique so that you can know maybe you should be looking at that character a little closer. Then you have the big eyes. Most people associate the big eyes with Japanese manga and anime. It makes sense because that's usually your main characters. The eyes are supposed to be the figurative windows to the soul. You are supposed to empathize with characters with large eyes and very simple iconic features. Iconic meaning easily you can stamp your face onto their face and you feel like you are in the story as that character. So if a character has very large eyes, or if a character that doesn't usually have large eyes suddenly has large eyes, I would pay attention to that and see what you're maybe supposed to be empathizing out of that character. Another quick tip if you are just trying to figure out who's speaking is always look for the little mark on the word bubble that will indicate who's speaking. If there is no mark on the word bubble, like this, if that doesn't exist and it's just a circle or like an exclamation, then that usually means whoever is talking is not on the page. Either it doesn't matter, because yeah, sometimes that happens. Sometimes literally just someone's yelling and it doesn't matter who it is because the point gets across. Either it doesn't matter or it's just the other person in the conversation. It's just contextual. A lot of manga really really isn't like that. It's fairly simplistic, and there's so many different types of manga you can choose from that you can usually find the one that suits your needs. The last thing I would pay attention to or look out for is if a character does not have eyes. So that is if a character's eyes are literally just gone, not shaded in at all, are overly shaded in some way you can't see into that character's soul all of a sudden, and that usually is a moment where they are going through some sort of crisis or a moment of panic. So don't be alarmed if your protagonist suddenly loses their eyes. They're not blind, they just are going through a moment of crisis, and because you're supposed to be empathizing with them, it's supposed to cause you alarm, but not to the point of where you think that they're blind. So I think that that is all I wanted to cover. I feel like it might be a lot. I am sorry if I have overwhelmed you guys in any way. I mostly just wanted to make sure you had a very concrete understanding of what the heck manga is all about, because I really do love manga. I love featuring it on my channel, and I don't want you to be afraid to pick a manga up, because I feel like there's probably a manga out there for everyone, and I would love you to be able to find yours. So I hope you are enjoying the sun or Mars stars wherever you are, and until next time, bye! I'm gonna mess up I'm gonna mess you guys up. You guys are gonna be like, so what again? Do I have anything ever at all? I don't know. Tara red ba. There's another thing. Eyes, water. Does this one actually have layering? Is it a good example? For the love of all that is holy, does this not have? No, it doesn't.